In the heat of World War II, an American pilot and his German adversary forge an unexpected bond of respect above the battle-scarred skies of Normandy, showcasing the unbreakable spirit of valor and honor. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the airfield in southern England, Lieutenant Michael Harris stood beside his Grumman F6F Hellcat, its dark silhouette blending into the twilight. The air was thick with anticipation, a palpable tension that hung over the squadron like a dense fog. Tomorrow, they would play their part in the largest amphibious invasion in history, a massive assault on the fortified beaches of Normandy. Harris and his fellow pilots had been briefed extensively, their mission critical to the invasion's success. They were to provide air cover for the troops storming the beaches, engage any German aircraft that dared to challenge them, and strike at the heart of the enemy's coastal defenses. It was a daunting task, but one for which they had been meticulously prepared. The pilots gathered in the briefing room, maps and reconnaissance photos sprawled across the tables. Harris's eyes were drawn to the jagged coastline of Normandy, a labyrinth of German fortifications and obstacles. The room buzzed with the voices of his comrades, discussing tactics and sharing last-minute advice. Yet amidst the camaraderie, there was an undercurrent of solemnity. They all understood the gravity of what was to come, the risks involved and the lives that hung in the balance. As the briefing concluded, the squadron commander, Captain Jameson, called for attention. His voice was steady, instilling confidence in his men. "Gentlemen, tomorrow we make history. Our nation, our brothers in arms are counting on us. I have every faith in this squadron to rise to the occasion. Fly fast, fly true, and let's bring each other home." The men dispersed, each lost in his thoughts as they made their way to their quarters. Harris lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, the weight of his thoughts a heavy cloak. He thought of his family back home, the life he had left behind when he answered the call to serve. He thought of the men he would face in the sky, enemies who were not so different from himself, fighting for their country just as he was. The night was restless, filled with the low murmur of voices and the occasional footsteps of a sentry. Harris and his squadron rose before dawn, the early morning air crisp and cool. They donned their flight suits and gathered once more at the airfield, their planes lined up like silent sentinels awaiting their command. As Harris climbed into the cockpit of his Hellcat, he felt a surge of adrenaline. This was what they had trained for, what they had been preparing to face. He glanced around at his squadron, a nod of solidarity shared between them. They were ready. The engines roared to life, a chorus of power and might that shattered the morning calm. One by one, the planes took to the sky, ascending into the darkness before the dawn. Below them, the English Channel stretched out, a vast expanse of water that separated them from their destiny. Today, they would be tested like never before. But amidst the uncertainty, one thing was clear. They were not just fighting for victory, but for freedom, for a world beyond the war's shadow. And in that moment, as they flew towards the horizon, they were united by a bond forged in the fires of courage and sacrifice. The eve of the invasion had passed, and history awaited their arrival. The darkness of the early morning was pierced by the formation of American Navy Hellcats, slicing through the cold air towards the French coast. The sky began to lighten, a pale blue seeping into the black as dawn approached. Below, the churning waters of the English Channel reflected the growing light, a vast and treacherous barrier that had kept the Allies and Axis powers at arm's length for years. Lieutenant Michael Harris gripped the controls of his Hellcat tightly, his focus absolute as he led his squadron towards their target. The briefing from the night before replayed in his mind, the images of the beaches and German fortifications etched into his memory. They were flying into the unknown, into the teeth of the enemy's defense, but Harris felt a calm resolve. This was their moment to make a difference, to turn the tide of the war. As the coast of Normandy came into view, the magnitude of the operation unfolding below became apparent. The sea was dotted with Allied ships, a vast armada stretching as far as the eye could see. Landing crafts made their way towards the beaches, and the first sounds of gunfire and explosions echoed up to the pilots. The squadron split into their assigned roles. Half dove towards the German fortifications, dropping bombs and strafing positions to clear the way for the landing troops. The other half, including Harris, climbed higher to provide air cover, vigilant for any signs of the Luftwaffe. Harris scanned the skies, his heart racing as he searched for enemy aircraft. The first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the battlefield below. It was in this surreal light that the enemy planes appeared, diving towards the Allied ships with lethal intent. The air battle was chaotic, a deadly dance of dogfights and aerial maneuvers. Harris found himself locked in a duel with a German fighter, their planes twisting and turning in the sky. Every move was a calculation, a gamble on life and death. Finally, with a precise burst from his guns, Harris sent the enemy plane spiraling towards the sea. As the battle raged on, Harris could not help but be awed by the scale of the invasion. The beaches of Normandy were a maelstrom of conflict, but through the chaos, there was a sense of progress. The air cover his squadron provided was crucial, protecting the troops below as they fought to secure a foothold on French soil. After hours of relentless fighting, the order came to return to base. Their fuel and ammunition depleted, the pilots withdrew, leaving the skies over Normandy to the next wave of Allied aircraft. The journey back across the Channel was a time for reflection. They had faced the enemy and held their own, but the day's toll was heavy. Harris knew that not all of his comrades would return, the cost of their victory written in the planes that were missing from their formation. Landing back in England, the squadron was met with a mix of relief and somber reflection. They had played their part in the opening act of the liberation of Europe, but the road ahead would be long and fraught with peril. As Harris stepped from his plane, the adrenaline that had sustained him began to ebb, replaced by a deep fatigue. Yet there was no time to dwell on the day's events. The invasion was ongoing, and their role in it was far from over. The squadron gathered once more, debriefing and preparing for the next sortie. Harris listened to the accounts of his fellow pilots, their voices a testament to the bravery and skill of the American Navy pilots. The day had begun in darkness, but now, as the sun reached its zenith, there was a sense of hope. The beaches of Normandy were still contested, but the Allies had established a foothold. The liberation of Europe had begun, and Harris and his squadron had been at the forefront of the effort. As Harris looked towards the sky, now clear of the morning's battles, he understood the weight of their responsibility. They were not just fighting for victory, but for the future, for a peace that seemed so distant in the heart of war. And as the day closed, Harris knew that they would rise to meet that challenge, again and again, until the fight was won. The skies above Normandy had become a sprawling canvas of conflict, painted with the contrails of aircraft locked in a desperate struggle for control. For Lieutenant Michael Harris and his squadron, the morning's initial foray was but a prelude to the relentless engagements that would define their day. As they took to the air once more, the landscape below bore the scars of the ongoing battle. The beaches, marked by the steadfast advance of Allied troops, contrasted sharply with the serene beauty of the French countryside, now marred by the machinery of war. This sortie brought them directly into the path of a formidable Luftwaffe squadron. The enemy pilots, seasoned in the art of aerial combat, presented a challenge unlike any Harris and his men had faced before. It was here, amidst the chaos of dogfights and the roar of engines, that the skill and bravery of the American Navy pilots would be truly tested. Harris's Hellcat danced through the sky, dodging and weaving as he sought to gain the advantage over his adversaries. His focus narrowed to the cockpit of a Messerschmitt bearing down on him, its pilot a silhouette against the backdrop of war. The two aircraft spiraled around each other, a deadly ballet at breakneck speeds. The engagement was interrupted by a sudden burst of gunfire from Harris's wingman, forcing the German plane into a defensive maneuver. Harris seized the opportunity, his fingers tightening on the trigger as he aligned his sights. With a steady hand, he fired, watching as the enemy aircraft took damage and began to descend, trailing smoke. Yet victory was short-lived. The battle raged on, drawing Harris and his squadron deeper into the fray. Each encounter with the Luftwaffe tested their limits, pushing them to the edge of their capabilities. But through it all, they fought with a ferocity and determination that honored their commitment to their mission and to each other. The turning point of the battle came as Harris found himself face to face with a German ace, Major Friedrich Weber. Weber, known for his cunning and skill, presented a formidable opponent. Their duel was a clash of titans, two masters of the sky vying for supremacy. The fight was grueling, pushing both pilots to their limits. Harris maneuvered through Weber's onslaught, countering with precision strikes. The duel was not just a test of skill, but of will, as each pilot sought to outlast the other. As they circled, Harris caught a glimpse of Weber's eyes through the cockpit glass, a moment of human connection amidst the impersonal machinery of war. In that instant, there was a mutual recognition of the courage and resolve that drove them both. The duel ended as abruptly as it had begun, with Harris executing a daring move that left Weber at a disadvantage. With a final burst of gunfire, Harris forced Weber's plane into a retreat, a tacit acknowledgement of respect between warriors. As the sky cleared and the Luftwaffe withdrew, Harris and his squadron regrouped. They were weary but unbroken, their resolve strengthened by the day's trials. The battle for the skies above Normandy had been a testament to their skill and bravery, a chapter in the larger story of the invasion that would be told for generations. The return to base was a time for reflection. The pilots were greeted as heroes, their actions having secured a crucial advantage for the Allied forces. Yet, amidst the accolades, there was a somber understanding of the cost. The skies over Normandy had claimed many, friend and foe alike. Harris stood beside his Hellcat, the wear and tear of the day's battles evident in its scarred exterior. He thought of Weber, the enemy pilot who had proved to be his equal in the sky. There was no hatred, only a warrior's respect for a worthy opponent. That night, as Harris and his squadron gathered to share their experiences, there was a sense of camaraderie that went beyond words. They had faced death together, and in doing so, had forged bonds that would last a lifetime. But the battle for Normandy was far from over. The invasion continued, and the pilots knew that the coming days would bring new challenges. Yet, for a moment, they allowed themselves to bask in the glory of their achievements, proud to be part of a force that had proved to be the finest their enemy had ever fought. The battle for the skies was more than a victory. It was a declaration of the indomitable spirit of the American Navy pilots, a testament to their skill, bravery, and unwavering dedication to the cause of freedom. In the days following the initial assault on Normandy, the American Navy pilots, including Lieutenant Michael Harris, shifted their focus from engaging enemy aircraft to providing crucial support for the ground troops now fighting their way across the French countryside. This new phase of the operation tested their adaptability and underscored the importance of air-ground coordination in the Allied strategy to liberate Europe. As Harris prepared for another sortie from the English base, The atmosphere among the squadron was one of determined focus. Their mission was clear: to disrupt German reinforcements and supply lines, thereby easing the path for the Allied advance. The stakes were high, as success on the ground was contingent upon their ability to dominate the skies and provide timely support to their comrades below. Flying over the Normandy landscape, Harris was struck by the transformation below. What had been serene fields and quiet villages were now the backdrop to a sprawling, dynamic battlefield. The pilots received their targets: a convoy of German trucks moving towards the front line, and artillery positions that were hammering Allied positions near a captured village. Diving down from the clouds, Harris and his squadron launched their attack. The roar of their engines was a prelude to the chaos unleashed upon the enemy. Rockets and gunfire rained down, destroying supply vehicles and disrupting the German advance. Harris felt a grim satisfaction in knowing their actions would relieve some pressure on the ground troops, allowing them to move forward with less resistance. The mission took them deep behind enemy lines, where the risk of anti-aircraft fire was ever present. Harris expertly navigated the flak-filled skies, his years of training and experience guiding him through the perilous task. Each successful strike against the German positions brought a mix of relief and adrenaline, the knowledge that they were making a difference fueling their resolve. Upon their return to base, the pilots were debriefed on the immediate impact of their sortie. Intelligence reports confirmed the disruption of enemy supply lines and the destruction of several key artillery positions. This success, however, was tempered by the loss of one of their own, a stark reminder of the cost of their mission. The squadron gathered to honor their fallen comrade, vowing to continue the fight in their memory. The days that followed saw Harris and his squadron repeatedly taking to the skies, supporting the Allied push through Normandy. Each mission brought new challenges, from targeting enemy fortifications to providing air cover for Allied convoys. The importance of their role in the ground advance was never more apparent than when they received direct thanks from the troops they had supported, a rare and cherished acknowledgment that bridged the divide between the air and ground forces. Amidst the relentless pace of operations, Harris found moments of reflection. He thought of the pilots they had lost and the enemy soldiers on the ground whose lives were forever altered by the war. The complexity of his feelings underscored the duality of his role as both protector and warrior, a guardian angel in the skies for the Allied troops fighting for every inch of French soil. As the Allied forces gained momentum, breaking through German defenses and reclaiming territory, the significance of the air support provided by Harris and his squadron became increasingly evident. Their efforts had not only paved the way for the ground troops, but had also sown confusion and fear among the German ranks, proving that air supremacy was a critical factor in the success of the invasion. The chapter of the Normandy campaign that Harris and his squadron contributed to was marked by relentless action, sacrifice, and the unyielding pursuit of victory. Their support for the ground advance was a testament to the critical role of air power in modern warfare and the bravery of those who take to the skies in defense of their comrades and their country. As Harris looked out over the airfield, watching the sun set behind his Hellcat, he felt a profound connection to the vast operation unfolding across Normandy. The unity of purpose among the Allied forces, the shared commitment to the liberation of Europe, was a powerful force, one that Harris was proud to be a part of. In the skies above Normandy, he and his squadron had proven themselves as more than just pilots. They were a vital component of the Allied war machine, pushing forward the front lines and shaping the course of history. The sun was setting over the airfield in England, casting long shadows and bathing the returning planes in a soft, golden light. Lieutenant Michael Harris stood beside his Hellcat, watching as the mechanics worked diligently to repair the wear and tear of continuous sorties. The day's missions had been successful, but the cost was always present in his mind, a somber counterweight to the victories they claimed in the skies. As the noise of the airfield faded into the background, Harris found himself lost in thought. The events of the past few days had been a whirlwind of action and emotion, each mission blurring into the next. Yet, in these quiet moments of reflection, the weight of their experiences settled upon him. He thought of the ground troops they had supported, the men fighting tooth and nail across the French countryside. Their bravery was a constant source of inspiration, a reminder of the collective effort to push back the darkness that had enveloped Europe. The camaraderie among the pilots was stronger than ever, forged in the crucible of combat. They shared a bond that went beyond words, an unspoken understanding born of shared danger and mutual respect. Harris knew that the friendships he had made during this campaign would last a lifetime, a rare light in the midst of war's shadow. Yet, with the camaraderie came the inevitable losses, the empty chairs at the mess table. Harris felt each loss keenly, the names and faces of fallen comrades etched into his memory. It was a stark reminder of the stakes of their mission, the human cost of the liberation they fought for. In the silence of the dusk, he allowed himself to mourn, to honor their sacrifice in the quiet of his heart. Turning his gaze to the skies, now streaked with hues of pink and orange, Harris reflected on the change in himself. The war had tested him in ways he could never have imagined, pushing him to the limits of his endurance and courage. He had faced fear, witnessed the best and worst of humanity, and emerged transformed. The innocence he had once possessed was a casualty of war, replaced by a profound understanding of the fragility of life and the price of freedom. As the light faded, Harris was joined by his fellow pilots, their faces weary but resolute. They gathered in a loose circle, sharing stories and laughter, a brief respite from the demands of war. In these moments, Harris felt a deep gratitude for the men and women who stood beside him, a makeshift family bound by a common purpose. The conversation turned to the future, to the world they hoped to build once the war was over. They spoke of dreams deferred and plans on hold, of the promise of peace and the work that would be required to heal the scars of conflict. It was a vision of hope, a belief in the possibility of a better world emerging from the ashes of war. As the night deepened, Harris and his squadron returned to their quarters, the day's reflections a bittersweet tapestry of loss, camaraderie, and hope. The war was far from over, and the challenges ahead loomed large. Yet, in the shared experiences of the day, in the bonds that had been strengthened and the memories that had been honored, there was a renewed sense of purpose. For Harris, the reflections at dusk were a reminder of the complexity of war, the interweaving of personal and collective narratives. It was a confirmation that, despite the chaos and destruction, there were moments of clarity and connection that transcended the conflict, moments that defined the human experience. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new dangers, and new opportunities to make a difference. But for tonight, in the quiet of the English countryside, there was space to breathe, to reflect, and to prepare for the days ahead. The war would continue, but so too would the resilience, courage, and humanity of those who fought it. In the aftermath of the relentless air battles and the critical support provided to the ground forces, the dynamics of the conflict in Normandy began to shift. The Allied advance continued to press forward, each day bringing them closer to breaking the German hold on France. Amidst this backdrop of ongoing struggle, a unique encounter unfolded that would leave an indelible mark on Lieutenant Michael Harris. Several days after the intense dogfight with Major Friedrich Weber, an unexpected message arrived at the Allied base. It was from Weber himself, relayed through the Red Cross in a rare moment of communication between enemies. The message was addressed to the American pilot who had bested him in the skies over Normandy. In his message, Weber expressed a deep respect for the skill and bravery Harris had shown during their engagement. He acknowledged the professionalism and courage of the American Navy pilots, stating that they were among the finest adversaries he had ever faced. This acknowledgement from a respected foe was more than a mere gesture. It was a symbol of the mutual respect that could exist even in the midst of war. Harris was taken aback by the message. It was a stark reminder that beyond the roles they played as soldiers, there were human connections that transcended the conflict. The message prompted Harris to reflect on his own perceptions of the enemy, realizing that honor and respect were values shared by many on both sides. The squadron gathered as Harris shared Weber's message. It sparked a conversation among the pilots about the nature of war, the respect for one's adversaries, and the complexities of fighting men who were not so different from themselves. This moment of reflection served to deepen the bonds within the squadron, reinforcing the understanding that their struggle was part of a larger human experience. Inspired by Weber's gesture, Harris decided to respond. With the help of his superiors and the Red Cross, he crafted a message back to Weber. In it, Harris expressed his admiration for Weber's skill as a pilot and his gratitude for the gesture of respect. He wrote of the hope that, once the war was over, such mutual respect could serve as a foundation for peace and understanding between their nations. The exchange of messages between Harris and Weber became a legend within the squadron, a story that epitomized the honor and respect that could be found even in the heart of conflict. It served as a reminder that, despite the dehumanizing forces of war, individual acts of respect and understanding could shine through the darkness. As the Normandy campaign progressed, the story of Harris and Weber's exchange resonated beyond the confines of the squadron. It was a testament to the idea that, even in war, there was room for chivalry and recognition of one's foes as worthy adversaries. This moment of respect became a beacon of hope, a glimpse into a world where understanding and honor transcended the divisions of conflict. The war would continue, with its trials and tribulations, its victories and losses. But for Lieutenant Michael Harris and those who heard the story of his encounter with Major Friedrich Weber, there was a newfound appreciation for the complexity of the human spirit. They were reminded that on both sides of the battle lines, there were individuals with the capacity for honor, respect, and perhaps, one day, reconciliation. As the sun set on another day of conflict, Harris looked to the skies, pondering the future. He envisioned a world where the courage and respect displayed in the heat of battle could be channeled into building lasting peace. With the war still raging, this vision seemed distant, yet the exchange with Weber offered a glimmer of hope, a reminder of the shared humanity that could one day heal the wounds of war.